1 in 7 Americans are now on GLP-1 drugs like Ozempic and Wegovy, but here's what doctors aren't telling you. Over half of users quit within a year, and a third of those quit because of difficult side effects that disrupt their training, their protein intake, and thus their ability to maintain muscle mass when trying to make the necessary lifestyle changes in parallel. My guest today watched his father get prescribed 19 different pills just to manage his Ozempic side effects, and that nightmare sparked him to identify ways to manage them proactively. You'll discover why nausea and fatigue from GLP-1s aren't just uncomfortable, but actively work against your health and fitness goals, the clinical data behind supplementation to help with these side effects, and tips to stay consistent with your routine and progress while dealing with these medications. Welcome to Wits and Weights, the show that helps you build a strong, healthy physique using evidence, engineering, and efficiency. I'm your host, Philip Pape, and today I'm very excited to be discussing a topic that affects millions but gets very little attention in the space, and that's the impact of side effects when taking GLP-1s and what you can do about it. My guest is Justin Silver. He's a serial entrepreneur, founder and CEO of SymptoGuard, which he created after watching his father suffer through months of debilitating side effects, hospital trips from Ozempic. Now, Justin's background obviously gives him a unique perspective on both the business and personal sides of this huge health trend, and he's here to share what he's learned about the real-world impact of these drugs and what we can actually do about it. So today, you're going to learn the latest clinical research about managing these effects, specific strategies to protect your consistency, your training, your nutrition, and thus, of course, your muscle mass if you're taking or planning to take these. And Justin, I just want to thank you so much for coming on the show.
Yeah, it's an honor to be here. Thank you so much for having me. I'm really excited to discuss this with you. I think we have the opportunity to help millions of Americans, and now I'm excited to do it.
So let's start right off with talking about side effects and how big of an issue that is. Like if you had to create a pie chart of all the reasons people maybe quit the drugs or have issues with these, where would side effects fit into that?
So side effect, someone already created the pie chart. Thankfully, I don't need to be that guy. Side effects are the number 2 reason that people stop taking a GLP-1. Number 1 is actually having to do with injection frequency, both the fear, the frustration, and just having to deal with needles, even the ones that automatically go in. Injection frequency and fear is the number 1 reason people stop taking a GLP-1. And side effects are a close number 2. They can have deep impact for people, especially the older you get, the more the side effects tend to impact people. So when you're talking about people in their 50s, 60s, and 70s, for them it is a truly pressing issue.
So let's talk about it, what they are, why it affects people when they're older, because I do like those demographic segments because it kind of gives us sometimes an insight into other things, because we do that all the time when we talk about health longevity training and so on. So tell us more about the side effects, which ones are the most common perhaps, and then why the age difference.
When it comes to people who are older, they've often been in the same way of doing things for decades. So if you suddenly are 25 or 30 or 35, your ability and your body's ability to change and deal with eating less, dealing with a different speed of your, the food moving through digestive tract, you're able to just deal with that a little bit better. Your body is more able to cope with those differences. I liken it to pregnancy. If a person in their early 20s gets pregnant, they have that kid, they walk out of the hospital the next day, assuming all goes well. But if you're 40 years old and you're having a baby, regardless of how successful or healthy you are and how, healthy the baby is, it's still a big impact on your body. It's the same with GLP-1s. And so if you're losing 100 pounds at 65 years old and you've spent the past 35 years living a relatively sedentary life and overeating constantly, the impact is going to be much, much bigger.
Yeah, so that makes sense. And I know you have the personal story we alluded to in the intro here with your father that led to him taking a bunch of different medications to try to deal with the side effects and go to the hospital. I'm wondering if that would be a good story to segue into. What I'm curious about is the side effects, how they cascade, and what you learn from with your father's experience, essentially.
Yeah, of course. So, my dad got notification from his doctor when he was 62 years old. And he said, unless you can lose 100 pounds, you're not going to see your next birthday. type 2 diabetic, morbidly obese. And, he was having this experience where either he changed his lifestyle significantly or he wasn't going to make it. And so, we took a step back as a family, heard about Ozempic. He started taking Ozempic, and within 9 months, he lost 100 pounds. For him, truly a life-changing drug, something that's allowed him to survive and, to become a healthier person. But losing 100 pounds, in your early 60s is not a very simple or very easy thing on the body. And so, he faced debilitating side effects, nausea, dizziness, fatigue. He would go to the restroom, use that. And then when getting up, he would face that same nausea, that dizziness. He would end up passing out. And my mom would find him on the floor, passed out, and have to call an ambulance to come get him because she thought he was dead. He would, of course, go to the hospital, and the hospital would recommend different supplements each time that he could take to help combat this nausea, this dizziness, this fatigue. And so he was taking everything from chromium to CoQ10, prebiotics to probiotics, and more. And in the end, he was taking 19 pills every single morning. And I knew there had to be a better way.
Okay. And physiologically, why is there so much distress? Is it the rapid change that leads to this cascade and the body just can't quite handle it through the liver, the thyroid, all of the systems that are supposed to handle load and stress, or what's going on there?
Yeah, so it's, across the board. So some of it is from the actual drugs themselves. Slowing down your GI tract allows your body to absorb more nutrients from that food. That's great. You're not, wasting as much essentially. But when you slow that down, it not only pulls out the nutrients, but it can also pull out the water, and that could lead to constipation. You also are, getting the actual side effects of your body changing. So suddenly you have gaps in your nutrition because you used to eat a, 3,800 calorie diet that while, overeating and unhealthy, it generally filled your nutritional needs. And now suddenly your hunger is, evaporated, your food cravings are minimized, and your seeking of nutritional food might not be all there. So your body is changing, you're losing weight, you're not consuming enough food, and oftentimes there are gaps in that nutrition. So across the board, you're getting just a massive change in your body and your mind, and the side effects are a result of all of that.
So that makes a lot of sense. Constipation, the gut issues that are happening. I imagine your microbiome, we don't even begin to understand that yet on what's happening.
Exactly.
Even the body changing. I mean, even when you're doing it with just lifestyle, we know that you have to be aware of, okay, if you're in a big calorie deficit, not to have malnutrition, to eat enough fiber and nutrients and everything. So I'm curious, are there certain patients, okay, you mentioned age. What about the lifestyle differences? And what I mean by that is, I'm sure there are a lot of people on Ozempic that are trying to lift weights and eat more protein, and there are a lot that aren't. Do we see segmentation in that regard where the side effects are minimized a bit from natural lifestyle changes before we go to then supplementation?
Yeah, absolutely. I think, especially if you're younger and so your body's able to change a little bit easier, if you're eating a nutrition-filled diet that's got protein and it has, a good mix of vegetables, if you're doing all of that, you might still face some side effects, but you lower the likelihood drastically. So when I talk to peers and I say, hey, if you're taking a GLP-1 and you're 25 to 35 years old and you're doing everything right, the likelihood that you're going to have side effects is actually quite low. And you're not really somebody who, is a SymptoGuard prime customer or someone who that should be top of mind. Where we're targeting is someone who is, in their 40s, 50s, 60s, 70s. These people have spent a lifetime of a sedentary lifestyle. Generally, nutrition is not where it could or should be. And we are helping to fill those gaps for those people, because just because you start losing a little bit of weight, taking a GLP-1 does not mean you are a healthier person. It's a whole bundle of stuff that can make you healthy, and SymptoGuard plugs in to be part of that equation for millions of Americans.
Hey guys, I want to give a quick shout out to SymptoGuard for sponsoring today's episode. And honestly, it's a perfect fit given everything Justin and I have been digging into. If you're taking a GLP-1 med like Ozempic or Mounjaro, you probably know that the side effects can hit really hard. Nausea, low energy, digestive issues, nutrient absorption, and that can make it tough to stay on track with your training, with your protein, the lifestyle changes that you're trying to make, and just feel like yourself when going through this process. What I love about SymptoGuard is it was built for these with ingredients that you would recognize, that I would vouch for, like B12 and probiotics and ginger. It's a solid evidence-backed option for some of the side effects like nausea. In fact, in a 2025 study, 92% of users reported reduced nausea compared to just 24% on placebo. And that's a big deal when you're just trying to be consistent and when the side effects are the number one reason most people stop taking these meds. So if you are on this journey and you want to feel better while preserving muscle and staying consistent, give SymptoGuard a try, check it out. Just click the link in the show notes or go to witsandweights.com/SymptoGuard for 10% off your order. That's witsandweights.com/SymptoGuard or click the link in the show notes. Now back to our conversation with Justin. Okay, and that makes sense. And I appreciate the nuance because I definitely have spoken to people who are, there's conflicts of interest. People have their skepticism up, and I wanted to bring you on because I know that you do your best to support all of this with what the evidence says, and you're trying to help people who have a legitimate concern with a tool that they're trying to use in combination with lifestyle, and it's not for everyone. So we want to be honest about that, but also I appreciate you saying look, a lot of people face these side effects, and it's the number 2 reason people quit. And this is the tool we want to use, so let's try to make it all work together. Having said that, when we talk about the quitting from the side effects, what would you say, what does the segmentation data show in terms of which side effect or two is most prevalent and causes people to quit?
Yeah, so the two that stick out are nausea and what is defined as general GI tract discomfort. GI, gastrointestinal. This is anything to do with your stomach, your bowels. It, ranges constipation and diarrhea. It's all that discomfort all in one. So nausea and GI tract discomfort are the two biggest issues. They impact you when you wake up, when you go to bed. They have that kind of consistent feeling. Things like dizziness that often comes at a certain moment when you might be dehydrated because, again, your craving for even water is minimized. And so you might be dehydrated. So it hits you when you get up or when you sit down. Certain movements might trigger that, but you're not seeing dizziness just if you're sitting down on the couch. And, I think for all of these side effects, they have their moments where they would flare up the most. But generally, that kind of consistent nausea, especially nausea post-injection or nausea in the morning, as well as constant GI tract discomfort, those are the hardest hitting side effects.
Yeah, I could imagine that being an unpleasant feeling just from having one day of GI distress from a bad protein bar. I can't imagine, months and months when you're trying to use this. So then that raises the question for people who don't quit the drug and just deal with the side effects, what does it then lead to while you're on the drug? Does it reduce the efficacy? Does it change your eating and lifestyle patterns as a result?
Yeah, I mean, you think about it let's imagine you had nausea all the time.
Sure.
Right.
You just wouldn't eat, right? You wouldn't want to eat. Yeah.
Yeah. I mean, that would be just a bad way to live. A big part of the reason people are taking these drugs in the first place is they want to live a healthier life, right? Weight loss is the precursor to living a healthy life. Just seeing a number on a scale is meaningless if you can't walk and function. People are losing weight in order to spend time with their grandchildren, their children, in order to move around the world, to get in and out of their car easier, to feel good. And so that's what this all comes down to. And so with these side effects, which are, on your pathway to feeling good, if they're making it really hard to do that, you can imagine, you stop taking the drugs. It doesn't make it a pleasant experience, and it could just, derail that progress. So it's really about how do we live this healthy life?
And does it impact specific macro or micronutrients? And what I mean by that is, do you get less of an appetite for certain things, like less of an appetite for protein, or anything in particular, fruit? I don't know.
Yeah, so there's a concept in the GLP-1 world called food noise. It's basically that voice in your head that's saying you need to be eating food. And then when you walk past our world, our environment, and big food that has kind of trained us to seek food, you see McDonald's as you're driving through your town, and then you suddenly are physically craving McDonald's. You think about the French fries, the burgers, the soda, with all of those things. This minimizes that across the board. What it does not do is make you a healthy eater. And so that's still on you. But I believe in the American people, and I think that most people want to eat healthy. The reason we're not eating healthy, we're not living a healthy life, is because we're being chemically trained to not do that. Right? There's billion-dollar, $100 billion corporations whose goal is to make you buy more food and not be satiated by it. So we're all living in that world. We're chemically trained and addicted to this food. But now suddenly, if you didn't crave it, if you weren't addicted and you could give yourself that choice, I think that many Americans are making the right choice. And they're having a good, protein-filled meal with, a diversity of food in there. If you're given the chance to, escape that chemically addicted side of this, you have the potential to make those good choices. So there isn't necessarily suddenly you're not craving fats, you're not craving carbohydrates, and you're going to crave protein. It just limits that, completely. So your cravings go down in totality, but then it becomes an easier choice to eat right if you're suddenly not chemically, forced to eat incorrectly.
Yeah, yeah. And I would agree with that characterization. I think that you hit on one of what I see as three major prongs with this. Prongs, not problems, prongs. The first being what you just said, which is the food environment and the food noise. And I think that's coupled with what makes it very difficult for some individually, which is the brain-related genetics that we are well aware of now with appetite. We had Dr. Stephan Guyenet on the show talking about this, great guy in the field, right, researching this. And then the other prong would be the yo-yo dieting and the kind of the dieting history. We know that there's an exacerbated impact of dysfunctional appetite and hunger signals from a repeated history of dieting. So I'm just kind of agreeing with you that when you combine all those, for some people, it's such a huge hill to climb to get over that they just need a tool to say, okay, let's take away the noise, focus on the signal, and then we can build our lifestyle. But having said that, even when they're doing that and then they have side effects, do the side effects then cause them to make any different choices with their eating, for example? I'm thinking like nutrient malabsorption you mentioned. So does it affect anything special that is worth mentioning is what I'm getting at.
Yeah. I mean, think about it like this. If you're nauseous, you're probably going to not eat enough. And so it might not necessarily be the choices, but the situation is pretty simple. If your stomach is really hurting and you're having issues going to the bathroom, you're going to eat less. It's just like when you're sick in any way. And when you're sick or when you're eating less, it becomes harder to have that right mix of nutrients and to fill that all out. And that's where you get into this cycle of side effects and then malnutrition, and then side effects and malnutrition. And so, we're here to help break that. But, people are going through these journeys because it's a lot worse to be obese, and that's the fact. You have this whole, we're talking about side effects like nausea and, dizziness, GI tract. But having type 2 diabetes, having neuropathy in your fingers, being unable to move around the world, this is worse than all of that. And so we want to solve that. And we're part of the system that's helping us solve that.
Part of the system. I love that. That's the trigger word for me in a good way, system. Because we talk about building your system, which is a combination of components, right? It could be different tools to support those tools and lifestyle. And there's a funny story. Somebody in our group coaching program, he is concerned that he's not eating enough. He's on these drugs and he's trying to fix his lifestyle, let's just say. And his concern, not even having side effects, is I'm actually eating too little for what I'm trying to do. I'm trying to split the difference. So it's even more important that if the side effects make that worse, that we deal with them. So I want to talk about the ingredients in SymptoGuard, because I want people to know that, like, I advocate for evidence-based solutions. We don't fear monger. I don't want to deal with any weird, non-supported, herbs from some country that we've never heard of. Maybe there is something like that.
Foreign herbs here. Really, this is as simple as you can imagine. We are the all-in-one. So, my dad went to the hospital and they told him, take zinc, take chromium, take CoQ10, take prebiotics, take probiotics. We put that all in one. So you get two things when you take an all-in-one. Number one, it's easier. I don't know if you've ever tried to swallow 19 pills in one morning. I can tell you from my dad's experience, it sucks. And it's not the way you want to live life. And even though, you're taking these injections and you're trying to live a better life, taking 19 pills a day does not help you lead that life. The second thing is we're saving people some money. GNC and some of these big, pharmaceutical guys, or not pharmaceutical, big supplement guys, they make money when you buy 12 different bottles. You buy a bottle of CoQ10 for $20, a bottle of vitamin D for $20, a bottle of vitamin B12 for $20. Yeah, they make more money. We're putting that all into one, and we're charging, less than $50. If you're on the subscription, it's less than $1 a day. We're really trying to make this affordable for people because it should be. You're already paying a bunch of money for these drugs. Very few people are covered by insurance for a GLP-1. So you're self-paying for these drugs, oftentimes between $179 and $500 for, a brand name medication. Let's not add on $200 a month worth of supplements. Let's try and do that for $1 a day.
Yeah, exactly. And listeners, by the way, you're going to see, I'm going to include a link in the show notes because we were able to arrange a deal to get you a nice discount. So we'll throw a link in there, but you can check out the label. You can look at all the ingredients. You'll see B12, you'll see ginger, CoQ10, very normal stuff that we've talked about a million times. It's funny you mentioned the 19 pills. I actually take a lot of pills, but only because for performance stuff. But years ago, I used to make my own pre-workout because it was hard to find a pre-workout with what we now know to be like kind of the bread and butter, right? Caffeine, L-citrulline, beta-alanine, and like one other I'm forgetting. And now you can get that in every pre-workout practically on the market. But I actually had like a segmented tub with all the powders with special scoops for each to get the right amounts mixed every day. So I know what you mean, man. You got to be like super dedicated if you got to do that, but it's a pain. So having said that, then I know you guys have clinical trial results showing outcomes from these, and I'm curious what those showed, how significant the improvements were in different measures, different side effects compared to placebo.
Yeah, so we did a double-blinded trial, 126 participants. So the results are statistically significant. On average, people saw a 50% reduction in side effects. That's beyond what they had for the placebo. And so this is, truly significant. We are positively impacting people's lives. And that was generally across the board for nausea, dizziness, fatigue, and GI tract discomfort. So those were the things that we were focused on and where we really made an impact. That was all paid for out of our budget. This has been bootstrapped up until now. Because for me, I know there's a lot in the market. I know a lot of people are spending a lot of money and they're self-paying for GLP-1s. We're going to only sell them something that works. And so, it's not for everybody, but for those people who are experiencing the side effects and we are filling those nutrition gaps, we are really making an impact. And we have 100% satisfaction guarantee because, again, we know it's not going to work for everybody. So if you're taking SymptoGuard, you're not happy on it, all you have to do is reach out to us and we're happy to refund you because we know we're going to be helping millions of Americans. If you don't fit that because it's just not the right supplement for you, that's completely okay.
Awesome. Yeah, no, it's good to hear that. It's good that you've tested these. For listeners who want to try these out and we're going to hold Justin to his promise. Of course, let me know if it works and let me know if it doesn't. And, we'll keep him honest and I'm sure the proof is in the pudding. So when people are taking these, then do you see any sort of, I guess what I'm asking here is, have you measured any lifestyle modifications or long-term effects once you've mitigated the side effects from your drug specifically, or is it just assumed that, okay, the symptoms are gone, so ergo, it's going to be successful?
Yeah, so we don't have any kind of like longitudinal, over multiple years type of clinical trials or customer trials yet. But what we do have is evidence that we have is stay on their GLP-1 while taking SymptoGuard. And if you're taking the GLP-1 in order to lead a healthier lifestyle, minimize food noise, and be able to eat a healthier diet without being impacted by big food and chemical addiction to food, we are allowing you to do that for a longer period of time. So, my hope is I can come back to you in a year or two and say, here are all these case studies and all this experience. But right now, the main thing that we can say is we're making it easier for you to stay on a GLP-1. And that's what you want to do in the first place.
Makes total sense. Pretty easy to understand the cause and effect there. So looking ahead in the future of these drugs, right? We'd say GLP-1s, which admittedly is a simplification because there are now dual agonists. There's now triple agonist drugs. There's, so many things that operate on different pathways and different hormones. Are we looking at worse side effects profiles for those? Like what's going on there?
It's all kind of happening in real time. But here's what I'll say. In the beginning of the pod, we talked about the number one reason why people stop taking a GLP-1, and that's injection fear, fatigue, or frustration. That's the first time I've used those 3 Fs, but that sounds great. We're going to use that in the future. Injection, fear, fatigue, and frustration. And so that, if any of your listeners are very familiar with the industry, Novo Nordisk is the maker of Ozempic. They have set their targets and their research targets on actually minimizing the number of injections, the frequency. Right now, it's weekly. Their goal is within the next year to have that at monthly, and within 3 years to actually have that at quarterly. Kind of, a wildly impactful thing. At that point, you could just go to a doctor and they would be able to do it. It's only quarterly. The impact to your life would be, so minimal compared to weekly. But that does, as of now, temporarily worsen side effects. And so for us, the goal is to plug right into that system. We want to be able to help people stay on these drugs longer in a healthier way, and to be able to feel those effects without feeling terrible. That's our goal.
Yeah. No, that's good. That's a good point about frequency injection too, and how that would affect side effects because of the kind of the curve of that. So, another question related to this then in the future of the space is like, what are your competitors? Are there competitors in this space? Are there more targeted interventions coming? Are you guys looking to continue to improve the formula or change the formula, I should say? Maybe it doesn't need to be improved.
Yeah, always looking to improve. I love that you said that. I think, there's always room for improvement in this world. Like you said, at some point you had a bottle and you were trying to create your own formulations. I love to think of, Brian Johnson. I'm sure many of your listeners know him, the good and the bad, but he does say some things that I love. He says every calorie in his diet fights to be there. And that's how I think about supplements to support the GLP-1, where every piece of that supplement needs to fight to be there. It needs to be proven. It needs to have an impact. And if not, why are we taking it? And so that's really what we're doing. Right now we're focused on these side effects. There is absolutely a world where we can expand that offering, protein being a big thing that is often lacking in the diets of people who get on GLP-1s. There's something there. And long term, we think there are lots of different drugs with lots of different side effects, GLP-1s and others. And to be able to support along the range of side effects in general, there's a big potential impact.
No, that's great. Those listening who are thinking about taking them or currently taking them or can empathize with what you're talking about, supplements, I always think of a hierarchy, right? Kind of what you just mentioned, fighting for the space. I think of it as a pyramid where, you've got your training and your protein and adherence and like the big basics at the bottom, and then supplements are kind of near the top. But for some people, the supplements might rise further up depending on their needs. So I love that message. And then maybe I'm going to get you in trouble here, but what would you say to doctors and prescribing physicians when it comes to these drugs and the side effects? Because I feel like there's big gaps in prescriber education on these, as well as gaps in the advice and support that comes along with these drugs. Sometimes it's just prescribed, and other times there's, okay, you need to maybe lift weights or exercise or move and eat your protein and things like that. What's your message for the healthcare industry?
Yeah, I think the message for the healthcare industry is, first and foremost, kind of to double down on your point. You can't just start taking a GLP-1 and continue to live a sedentary life, eat less, and think that equals a healthy outcome. Simply losing weight doesn't mean you're getting healthier. It's a step in the right direction, but there's a lifestyle change. There's leading a more active lifestyle, and that's simply walking. For a lot of people, that's just walking around. And so it doesn't need to be you're in the gym, pumping iron for 5 days a week. It's small changes that can have a big impact. Walking is a huge one of them. And also the natural movement helps to minimize GI tract discomfort because you're actually getting up and walking around. There's a physical element to that as well. So I think just, pushing people to say it's not just that you eat less, it's that you need to change your whole lifestyle. That's, I think, the number one thing. The second thing is that a lot of telehealth providers and general healthcare providers, their first thought when they hear nausea is actually to prescribe Zofran. And Zofran is like dropping an atomic bomb when you need a small punch. I mean, it is the nausea drug given to patients on chemotherapy. It is a very, very powerful anti-nausea medication. Most people on a GLP-1 are facing mild nausea, slight nausea that they want to minimize. And so I'd say it's a really good idea to look in the middle before we go straight Zofran to say, are there supplements like SymptoGuard or others who are able to fill that gap for us? Those are the two big things: a great lifestyle, and let's focus on having the right kind of prescribed, drug or supplement that's going to meet them where their needs are.
Yeah, what came to me was minimum effective dose and also the opportunity cost. Like when you have an alternative now that helps you avoid taking something overly powerful, that's great because that didn't exist in the market before. And that is a net positive from just that perspective alone. And look, my wife, when she had morning sickness and chewed the ginger gum, I know how powerful simple herbs like ginger, is it an herb? What do you call ginger? I guess it's a root, right? But anyway,
it's a root, exactly.
But how powerful something like that can be. And you've done the research to say, okay, here, let's pick the right things, put them together into a supplement. All right. So listeners, a few things coming out of this here is, Justin's obviously an expert in the area and seems to care about this, is passionate about it. He's going to be in our Physique University doing a private live Q&A for anybody who's in there. And if you're not in there, another reason to join, because he's going to be in there answer your questions pretty soon. But is there anything else that you wish I'd asked Justin about this space that people need to know?
Man, you asked a lot of great questions. For me, I'm on a GLP-1 myself. I think this is going to have far-reaching impact. 1 in 7 Americans are taking a GLP-1 right now. That's expected to go to 1 in 4. We've already seen results on weight loss, but we're seeing results in anti-addiction and leading a healthier lifestyle. And this feels like we're in not even the first inning, but we're kind of in batting practice for the baseball game that is the GLP-1 industry. And I'm just really excited to be able to be in that world, to be able to help people in my smallest way and to be making an impact.
Yeah, I agree. And I can tell you do it with a smile, and the positivity and the energy is obviously there. So I appreciate it. And last thing, man, where can people learn about you and your work?
Oh, man. Check out SymptoGuard.com. It's the best place to learn about SymptoGuard and what we do, how we do it, why we do it. There's so much great stuff on there. A lot of hard people have made that site look amazing. And then also check out at SymptoGuard across different channels. We have a SymptoGuard Facebook group where we have people who are taking GLP-1s, SymptoGuard, all of that. They're able to get in there and have discussions about the experience. You could follow me on Instagram at @TheJustinSilver. If you want to check me out, I think I'm like the second or third most famous Justin Silver. So you can find me at @TheJustinSilver. And either way, I just hope that you get a chance to learn a little bit more. And a fun fact, I'll let you in on something. If you see any pictures of our bottle and there's a hand model holding that bottle, it is in fact my hand. So I am a famous hand model in the world of SymptoGuard.
That's pretty cool. All right, guys, check that out. I'm a big fan of education, so I definitely want you guys listening to get as educated as possible. Check out the Justin Silver on Instagram. And then instead of going straight to SymptoGuard.com, click the link in the show notes and you'll get 10% off SymptoGuard. And it is going to teach you it's going to take you to the site anyway. And you can actually go to witsandweights.com/SymptoGuard. So it's easy on you guys. witsandweights.com/SymptoGuard, or hit them up for the education on Instagram. Justin, it's been a pleasure. Hopefully people can learn more about you and the product as they check things out. Everybody be skeptical as always, but I think this is good stuff. That's why I'm vouching for it. And I appreciate you coming on, Justin.
Thanks so much for having me, man. This was great.